A man stabbed his girlfriend in the neck as she lay half asleep in bed following a row over a Snoop Dogg song. Stephen Turnock launched an appalling attack on the mum in her own home and proceeded to shave some of her hair off, throw an iron and an Xbox at her, and spray deodorant in her mouth. The 40-year-old was also repeatedly hit in the face. She escaped wearing only her dressing gown, but was covered in blood, having suffered 2 black eyes and a broken nose. Mr. Turnock from Oldham had been jailed for 4 years for the brutal attack. Jailing Mr. Turnock, recorder Kieran Ranking told him, "You are remarkably lucky you are not facing more serious charges, looking at the injuries and the blood loss." The judge said Mr. Turnock had done everything you could to humiliate her. The couple had been together for 18 months, and Mr. Turnock moved into her home in January. Her son left to stay with a friend overnight, and she and Mr. Turnock had drank together during the afternoon. During the evening, they had an argument about a Snoop Dogg song that they were listening to. Prosecutor Daniel Lister told Minsell Street Crown Court. The kitchen table was flipped over during the row, and she ran upstairs to get away from Mr. Turnock. He chased after her and hit her on the nose with his palm. Mr. Turnock went downstairs and returned armed with a kitchen knife. He lunged at her, and she suffered a cut to her hand as she went to protect herself. Mr. Turnock continued to hit her in the face. After stopping his attack, she went to bed and fell asleep, with Mr. Turnock joining her later. Then, at about 5:30 AM, she heard Mr. Turnock getting up, assuming he was going to work. She felt a knife pierce her neck, and she felt it pierce her in the side, Mr. Lister said. Mr. Turnock called her a slag and started throwing things at her, including an iron, an Xbox and a bottle. He sprayed a can of deodorant in her mouth and then used clippers to shave the front section of her hair off. Then he started cutting up her clothes with a knife, and he stabbed the mattress and broke her phone. Mr. Turnock left after she agreed to allow him to transfer money from his bank account to hers so he could withdraw some cash. She fled shortly after and saw a friend's partner who described her as looking a complete mess with 2 black eyes. She was holding towels to her neck and side, which were covered in blood. After going to the hospital, she was found to have suffered multiple wounds and needed surgery on her hand. But Mr. Lister said, mercifully, the injuries do not appear to be permanent or irreversible. Mr. Turnock of Clyde Street, Oldham, who had previous convictions including for affray and violent disorder, admitted wounding with intent. Defending Gwen Henshaw said Mr. Turnock is terribly ashamed of his behaviour and is very remorseful. He accepts he lost control and that he behaved in an appalling violent manner, she said. He doesn't wish to make any excuses for his actions. Mr. Turnock has had a difficult experience in his life, including the recent death of a child he had come to know as his grandson, Miss Henshaw said. He suffers from depression, which led him to drink, and he began to behave aggressively, the court heard. Two brothers had been sentenced for a total of 43 years in prison for smuggling illegal firearms into the UK. The at the time 30-year-old Daniel Burdett and Richard Burdett, 35, both from Liverpool, were convicted of arranging the importation of 16 pistols and automatic weapons, along with live ammunition and sound moderators. In early 2018, Border Force found the stash of weapons and accessories hidden inside a HGV lorry, spread across 2 trips to Dover and Killingholme docks. A National Crime Agency investigation identified that the organised crime network responsible for using corrupt truck drivers to smuggle firearms and ammunition from the Netherlands into the UK. Both brothers were linked to the seizures through DNA and fingerprints on the weapons and their wrappings. Richard Burdett was arrested in the UK but fled to the Netherlands whilst on police bail. He was located with the assistance of the Dutch law enforcement partners, arrested and extradited back to the UK in July 2019. Daniel Burdett was also tracked down to the Netherlands where he was living at the time. He had fled the UK 5 years previously after being linked to a drugs conspiracy by Merseyside Police. He was detained by Dutch police on a European arrest warrant on Christmas Day 2019 as he sat down to eat his Christmas dinner at a 5-star restaurant at The Hit. Daniel was extradited back to the UK by NCA officers to face trial alongside his brother, and the pair were found guilty on importation of firearms and ammunition at Manchester Crown Court. Richard was also convicted of possession of fraudulent UK passports. In addition, Daniel pleaded guilty to conspiring to supply cocaine in connection to the Merseyside Police investigation. They were both sentenced at the same court. Daniel Burdett received 25 years in prison and Richard was sentenced to 18 years in prison. The NCA branch commander, Richard Harrison, said, "Had this significant quality of lethal weapons reached the criminal marketplace, There is no doubt they have been used to inflict serious violence and fear into our communities and put the British public in serious danger. The successful prosecution of the Burdett brothers demonstrates the commitment of the NCA and its partners in disrupting the supply chains of illegal firearms and identifying the organised criminals behind them. I would like to thank Border Force and the Dutch Police, the Royal Dutch Military Police, the KMAR, and Merseyside Police for their excellent cooperation over the course of the investigation, which enabled us to bring them to justice. Six drug dealers have been locked up after the police uncovered a nationwide conspiracy finding £70,000 of drugs on a courier driving the A19. Joanne Cooke was pulled over at Crawthorne near Yarm as she was couriering the drugs into the area from Liverpool. She was found with 2 kilos of cannabis in her car and half a kilo of cocaine, which was described as high purity and high import. The drugs were being offloaded to Teesside and the southeast of England. A network supplier on Teesside then sold the drugs on the street. Police records showed Miss Cooke was in constant contact with Liverpool-based Dawrant Junior during every trip she made. Teesside Crown Court heard that Mr. Dawrant Junior was the gang's organiser, and he worked alongside his dad, Dawrant Senior, with both stepping in to courier the cocaine and cannabis after Mr. Cooke's arrest, until they found a new courier to take over her job. Members of the Merseyside-based gang, which were placed under surveillance by the police, had different roles in order to keep the drugs operation running smoothly. Dawrant Junior, who was 43, described as the linchpin at the heart of it, arranged more than 70 courier trips from Teesside to Liverpool. Dawrant Senior, who was 62, was the warehouseman who also kept notes on financial transactions. Edward Medcalf, Alan McCraig, and Stephen Folan were sentenced for their roles as couriers. The gang's text messages revealed that they were paid approximately around £200 per journey. The gang were responsible for transporting large quantities of cocaine and cannabis, mainly to Teesside, but also to dealers across the country. All of the gang pleaded guilty to the 2 charges of conspiring to supply Class A and Class B drugs, except for Mr. Folan, who was found guilty after a trial. Mr. Folan's defence told the judge that he now accepts his part in the operation. Judge Paul Watson told the court that Class A drugs like cocaine are highly addictive. The misery and damage that addiction causes to the physical and mental health is all too familiar to those who practice and sit in criminal courts. Addicts invariably resort to crime in order to satisfy their cravings. At a higher level, the drug trade and the astronomical profits that it generates frequently gives rise to gang rivalries and turf wars, which lead to public disorder and serious violence. Jailing them one by one, the judge told them, each of you were involved. It's supply at a serious and commercial end of the scale, and you are a plague on society.